Dave Messina.
I am the president and CEO of FPV Freedom Coalition. We've been at it 4 years, advocating the FAA for the rights of recreational UAS operators.
Josh Bixler.
Hello, I'm the president of Flight Test, president of the Flight Test Community Association.
And people on my channel are no stranger to you, Blunty. But they may not know you with the hat that you're wearing right now.
That's true. I am, it's Blunty, and I'm also the VP of Governmental Affairs at the FPV Freedom Coalition.
And we're here today because there are some big things going on in the world of, the FAA regulations, remote ID, and all that stuff. And the big thing that's going on right now is that the FAA Reauthorization Act is up for reauthorization. This is something that has to happen every 5 years?
Yes.
And it's a big deal because that's when we and the hobbyists are used to the FAA coming along and saying, here's what you have to do. And they kind of just make it up as they go. But the FAA Reauthorization Act is where Congress says to the FAA, here is what you must do. And this has the force of law. And this is a big deal because anything that we can get Congress to write into the FAA, like remote ID. Some number of years ago, Congress said, make remote ID a thing. And the FAA ran with that. So this is an opportunity for us to get something into the FAA's directives. And there's something specific that we want. But you guys, let's say you guys want. What is it?
Okay, so what we're asking is it's the registration lower bound. We want it moved up from 250 grams up to 1 kilogram. And the thought being that there really was no foundation put into the 250 grams. We feel that the 250 grams could if we move it up to 1 kilogram, we pick up STEM programs, we pick up 5-inch FPV racers, and we pick up RC models that are smaller and largely that people are flying either in their backyards, their schoolyards, their churchyards, their parks. So they're not taking huge models out to a flying field, but this is so they can fly anywhere. And we thought that was a sensible place to go from 250 grams up to 1 kilogram.
So the idea behind this is that right now, the way the rules are written, if your aircraft is less than 250 grams and you're flying it recreationally, you don't need to have a remote ID module. You essentially act like remote ID doesn't exist. And by raising that to 1 kilogram, you will basically make it easier for more people to comply with the rules. I want to circle back later to the sort of arbitrary, the original source of that 250 gram, because I don't think people are going to believe where that actually seems to have come from. But before we do that, I'll save that. One of the things that people say that I think we need to address head on is, what do you say to the people out there who say, I don't want to take action on this. This whole thing is ridiculous, and I'm not going to comply with it, and I don't want to hear about it. 250 grams, 1 kilogram, doesn't matter. I'm not putting a remote ID module on my drone either way. The FAA can bite my butt. Why should those people still care and still act?
Well, one thing that, on a very high level view is flight tests and I believe everyone that's in the hobby, FPVFC, we want to get people in the hobby. We don't owe it to the FAA to say whether what they're asking for and endorse that openly. It's everyone's personal right as an American to choose whether they comply or not comply. But if I'm going to look you in the eye and I'm going to say, I want to get you in the hobby, or if I'm going to go to a school and I say, I want to fill your classroom with the wonderful gift of flight, there's no way that we can give them that pathway without having to show them how to do it in a way that is legal and compliant. And that is our charge as a CBO. That's our charge personally, to make sure that we're not opening them up to problems in the future. It's a really great way to destroy the hobby by saying, this is an amazing hobby, get into it, this is how you do it, and then open them up for problems in the future. They need to know and they deserve to know. It's everyone's personal right to say, I will not comply. I'm not looking to change their heart, change their minds, but I am looking to make sure that path to compliance is as simple and reasonable and logical as possible. And that's exactly what we're trying to do with changing the 250 to 1 kilogram rule, is it really puts a much higher level of practical knowledge and practical application to this whole process. Anything under 1 kilogram really poses no risk.
I would also remind those people who feel that way that, doing this, even just a simple, 5 to 10 minute process here. I mean, honestly, 20, 30 seconds if you do it fast enough, you can get the message out to these people to remove restrictions that you're under. Even if you don't want to comply or not comply, I feel like most people who are interested in not complying at least want to see these rules reduced. And, our goal here is to do that. We're not trying to add something. We're trying to remove something, remove restrictions on people, make less people to be criminals, that sort of thing. So I feel like this is positive for even the people who are not interested in complying, because we're, trying to change the landscape for the better for everybody.
That's a really good point, Blunty, that there's people out there who are very, very anti-FAA, and it seems like those people could be convinced to see this as an opportunity to strike against the FAA and tell Congress, tell the FAA to do this thing. And if Congress does this, then the FAA will have no choice but to comply. So if you don't like the FAA pushing us around, then you should be taking action to write this letter, which we'll talk a little bit more about later in the video, even if you don't want to comply or don't intend to comply.
And it's the exact opportunity and activity you want people to enjoy right now to fix problems that exist in America today and will tomorrow. I'm sure you've heard this number, Joshua, but 640,000 jobs will be short of in 10 years. That's in aviation. Just imagine what that'll mean for our country when there's 640,000 less people to fill the current roles. And let's not even take the advancements and the opportunities that are coming around. That's huge. And the very first thing that is going on with this remote ID regulation is cutting the legs out of all of it. Personally, with the with FT STEM, we have over 10,000 students actively doing model aviation. These laws, and with FRIAs and remote ID, is effectively going to kill it all. And Dave and I were in meetings where the FAA made it known publicly that they really have no desire to endorse over 4,000 FRIA sites. That immediately takes out all the opportunities. There's a lot more than 4,000 schools. We can all agree on that. And there's definitely a lot more than 4,000 people flying in their backyards, not to mention other locations. This is terrible for the hobby. And the fact that they're walking the FRIA opportunity so slow, or FRIA process so slow, we have to have a logical path to compliance. And I think raising the limit to 1 kilogram is the perfect solution.
There was a time in let's say 6 months to a year ago, perhaps, when the general sentiment that I saw was we hoped that FRIAs would be the way that typical people could manage to keep enjoying the hobby without having to be sort of overburdened by remote ID. And we got CBOs. You guys, FTCA and FPV Freedom Coalition, both got recognized as CBOs. That was very hopeful. You guys started submitting CBO applications, including I sat down with a fellow from the FPVFC. We submitted my home as a FRIA. And then you guys got into a meeting with the FAA, and the FAA was like, yeah, no, it's basically just going to be fixed flying fields. It's not going to be individual people's backyards. It's not going to be parks. And basically FRIAs, am I mischaracterizing it? FRIAs, a lot of that hope seems to have sort of withered.
Yeah, and we've not given up, but it's and if you think of just the numbers, the FAA has cited that there are 1.78 million UAS operators in the United States. So if you swag that to 1.5 million, then you say, well, for every user, let's group 20 users into a FRIA. Oh, okay. So 20 people have to get together to fly a FRIA. That's 75,000 FRIAs. So off by an order of magnitude, and then double it. So the numbers, and we want to work with the FAA. We have been, that meeting with them was on February 1st. We've had repeated communications. We have a list of questions. We're trying to make this work, and we're working and keep asking, we really need this to be larger than 4,000. What can we do? So we're not giving that up. And so it's FRIA first. And then, as you've heard, Josh and Flight Test are working on a broadcast module, and this is the third piece. Well, can we raise the lower bound of the registration requirement from 250 to 1 kilogram?
I think that a lot of people struggle with the sort of boring reality of how progress, if it could be called progress, sometimes it feels like lack of regress, occurs in these things, which is that it feels like there are seldom just clear victory moments. Mm-hmm. And yet you guys, and I think a lot of people see the big losses or the small losses and they go, this is screwed, I'm out. And they check out. And you guys keep, I don't know how you guys keep going. Because what I see is you're continuing, you're like, we lost ground over here. Where's the next place we can sort of make an attack over here and try to gain any concessions, any grounds? And it sounds like that's what you're doing now with the 1 kilogram limit.
Well, Josh, thanks for those kind words too. And it's definitely not a solo operation. Without the hard work that Dave and FPVFC is doing, especially within all these different task groups, I've only gotten to sit on one task group. And I may be in my element to teach a small child how to fly. I may be in my element to design and build an airplane. But Dave stands above the rest with practical knowledge and organization and things like that. I think there's a beauty in both the FTCA and the FPVFC working together. And I think that's a model that should be shared through all the CBOs. We did reach out proactively to the AMA and ask them to be part of this. And as of so far, we haven't even gotten a reply yet. But I hope we will, because if every CBO can gather around this and leverage our communities to ask for this one thing to Congress to put in, I think that will be an opportunity to quickly change a wrong to a right. And I believe the FAA is doing in their own mind what they think is right and proper, but we're not getting much success, and it's going to be to their own detriment. But if we can work through Congress, if we can work through our local representatives that we have a lot more sway over because these people are elected, we have a chance to really right a wrong, and something's not going to take 5, 7, 10 years.
That's a really good point, Josh. When you think about who is the FAA beholden to, I mean, it's not just sort of legal, sort of org structure, but it's who is in their ear. Who do they see as their constituents or their customers? And I imagine it's primarily full-scale aviation. Yeah. And then you've got organizations like the Commercial Drone Alliance and the AMA with hundreds of thousands of members who are they're used to hearing from them. And then we come along with our little, and I'm amazed at the amount of input that you guys have gotten, getting on working groups and tasking groups and so forth. But we are in some ways not really their constituents, and they're not used to hearing about our concerns. But when we go to an elected representative, I mean, on some level, we are their constituents, literally, in many cases.
Beautifully said.
This is an area that we hopefully can utilize our numbers. My best estimate is there are over 300,000 FPV operators in the United States. And Josh is very humble about it, but he's turned around model airplane flight in the United States. So it was a decreasing hobby. It's now up over 1 million people in the United States. So we've got that many people that they vote or their parents vote, and these we can definitely make a difference.
I think that I'm going to be bold here and say that this is a show your true colors moment for the AMA. And I know you guys can nod and be quiet, or you can speak if you want to. But the AMA from what I've seen, the AMA defends the rights of their members, which is, of course, the right thing for them to do. And a lot of times it feels like they don't consider FPV hobbyists or people who don't fly at traditional fixed flying fields to be their members, and they don't go out of their way to defend those rights. I don't think there's any question that the 1 kilogram limit would be good for AMA members.
Yeah. And
if the AMA doesn't come out and support this with just as much exuberance as they've supported other things, I feel like they will have shown their true colors. I don't know. Do you guys have any comments about that? I'm putting you on the spot.
No. And here's the thing. I have strong opinions on how to get people in the hobby and how to engage people and stuff. I don't want that just for a flight test. I want that for the whole community, and I want the way that we do it, if people find that valuable, to go into AMA clubs, to go into AMA fields, because we have a really cool method and formula to introduce this hobby to young kids. If you don't do that, if you don't protect that, if you don't look at things like raising this weight limit up to that, what they're effectively doing, separating everything about maybe what they feel about different CBOs and where they're positioned with membership and stuff, But if we don't work together as a group with all the CBOs getting in one accord around this, it's really going to affect how we get people in the hobby. Because I can no longer go out to Johnny or Nancy and say, hey, do you want to learn how to fly an airplane? Okay, well, the first thing you need to do is you need to go ahead and, oh, you're not in a FRIA? Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. You need to buy this module. That's going to cost you some money. And you're going to need to be able to put this module in this airplane. Now you just doubled. And when you look at a plane that weighs 1 kilogram and you look at the module, even the most cost-effective module could effectively double the price of that plane.
Yep.
Let's look at people that struggle just to pay their bills, but they want something they can do as a family. Let's go ahead and look at where, okay, well, let's say you don't need to worry about that because every AMA field has a FRIA on it. First of all, that's going to take years because we found out one FRIA application could take up to 4 months to approve. But let's just pretend, we wait 7-10 years and all these FRIAs are magically approved. Now, Johnny and Nancy have to go and drive to a location. We don't know whether that's going to be 10 miles, 5 miles, or 50 miles. They're going to have to pay yearly dues. They're going to have to pay a membership, and then they're going to have to buy their plane and fly. Those financial burdens is exactly why this hobby was stagnated and why it was kept to a very small demographic. And I strongly oppose that with all my heart. The original thing that got us into teaching people to fly is if you can afford the price of a video game, we can get you in the hobby. And that was what started the swappables. That was what started our use of foam board. I want to protect that, but that is not something that belongs only to my mind or the flight test community. That belongs to everybody. And I want the AMA to know that that's an olive branch that they can grab onto anytime. And I want them to be involved, and I want to work with them. And I know David does too, to make this a reality. It's up to them on whether they respond.
Yeah. Well, I hope that they get on board.
I do too.
I hope that they will see that this is good for everyone, including their constituents.
Yeah.
And not let the fact that it didn't come from their constituents or their board of directors or whatever prevent them from supporting what's universally a good idea.
I do. I believe the AMA does listen to their members, and I would encourage the members, if they find value in this, make it known, because I do believe with all my heart that they want to represent their members well. So if the members ask for this, I believe they'll get on board.
I mean, AMA members should be reaching out to the AMA. If the AMA members would like, I think some AMA members have the attitude of, I don't need to worry about this. The AMA is going to take care of making sure that my fixed flying field is a FRIA, so this doesn't affect me. I will throw out an anecdote, by the way. I got an email last week from a person who is in the Washington, D.C. exclusion zone, just at the edge of it, and he said, our 2 flying fields are not going to be approved as FRIAs because they're in the exclusion zone. And he said, we reached out to the AMA and they were like, yeah, I don't think we're going to be able to do this. They're going to lose their flying fields. And so the idea that all AMA members don't need to worry about this because the AMA will take care of them, well, that's not necessarily true, but everybody could benefit from this 1 kilogram limit.
Yeah.
So there is an action that we want people to take. And I say we because I include myself in that. I want people to take that personally, but you guys are the ones driving it. And that is to write to your representatives. You guys have form letters ready to go. I'll put a link down in the video description to your video. It's an 8-minute video where you guys go a little bit more in depth about what and why you're choosing this particular tack. But the bottom line is that everybody watching this video needs to do as much as they can to get as many letters as possible sent. The link in the video description to those relevant things, people can go find them.
That's perfect. Let me draw a line under when we talk about notice for public, or NPRMs, notice for public response. Then you have to put your own words in that, and we ask nuance. This is count, and this is copy paste. Please send these memos to your congressional representatives, a federal congressional representative, and your 2 senators, whether they are on the aviation subcommittees in the House and in the Senate or not. Please do it. So that's 3 memos. We've got the memos. It's a copy and paste.
Can we do it via email?
Some representatives still use email. More and more are opting to a website, which picks up, and so you have to do a copy into a web form. So it's not I
don't literally have to print it and mail it, though.
Goodness, no.
See. So if you're watching this, down to the video description, please. If you just do it for me, that's fine. I don't care, but do this.
Thank you, guys.
Get these letters sent. I said earlier in the video that we would reveal the origin of the 250 gram limit. And I had an argument with somebody in my Discord server last night on my live stream. He said, well, the European bodies also adopted the 250 gram limit, and they tend to have very good science behind their numbers. So surely this can't be true. But Blunty, you think you found the origin of the 250 gram limit. What is it?
Yeah, it happens to be the same one for the EU as well. They use a different set of studies to get there, but it's the same place. So essentially, the 250 gram limit comes from a number that's 79 joules, 58 foot-pounds of torque. This is like a force value, and that value is what they use to decide the kinetic energy of a drone, and they use that to calculate out 250 grams.
Okay.
So if you go through,
it's a work unit, not a torque unit.
It's a dangerous amount of force. This is enough force to seriously injure a person, so a drone shouldn't be able to have this. Actually, it's Joules' energy. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes. So that all sounds logical, but unfortunately, if you keep going back through the documentation, this number essentially comes from study after study, paper after paper, and you keep going back through the documents, and you finally get to a document from 1896.
Oh, didn't have drones in 1896, did they?
They didn't have airplanes.
They did not. This was a document called Shooting Training for Infantry. It's a French document by Mr. Rohn. And essentially, he describes the amount of effort it would take to remove someone from the battlefield with a rifle. He also describes this in what you would say is like common knowledge information. So he shares the value, but he doesn't share the mathematics, the documentation, any studies, any evidence. He just says basically, this is what my commanders have always told me. This is what we understand on the battlefield to be true, and these are the numbers we're sharing.
So what you're saying is, back in 1896, some French guy made up this number, put it in a paper, and then everybody else just kind of seems to have kept copying it all through down history. And the FAA has just latched onto it as this is the dangerous number. But it has no actual scientific basis as far as we can tell.
That's correct. And there's a repeated history of all these papers over the years.
Self-referencing.
And explaining that, where they each, there's many of these papers that explain specifically why this doesn't make sense. Why.
Oh, they rebut it.
100%. Yeah, there's multiple times and multiple papers where they rebut this information. But essentially, the idea is that there's not a better presented piece of information in these cases. And because of the history, it's easier to just maintain using the status quo and not shake it up.
So this is where they backed out of a kinetic energy value, the mass, KE equals 1/2 mv squared. So that's how they back calculated and came up with 250 grams.
So one of the things that I know you guys are working on, and this is more of a long-term goal, is actually looking at the danger. Like one of the things you talked about was that a foam aircraft weighing a certain weight and crashing into a person is going to have a different impact than like a carbon fiber aircraft or a metal aircraft. And so on the longer scale, I think you guys are working on, what's the phrase that you use?
Target level of safety.
Target level of safety. And actually saying to the FAA, we should evaluate the safety and risk of each of these types of drones.
And we've said it a couple of times, and I'm encouraged that this is gaining some traction. The first time we brought it up to the FAA was in the DAC, or Drone Advisory Committee, Tasking Group 11, and the FAA wrote a safety framework, gave it to us as a group, and we put back our recommendations. And basically they were saying, well, drones should be safer, so we're going to take the 79 joules from 1896, and we're going to move it by an order of magnitude, so that should do it. And we said no. And we said you should use this. It has much more of modern day science in it, and it can be made applicable to and taken into account things like population density and population exposure and the probability of an event happening, because we now have years of data that show how frequently do we think one of these aircraft come in contact with a human. And so let's just set it at 1 in 10 million And then we can alter the frangibility or the amount of deformation that a structure has when it is hit, and we can come up with a much better piece of science. So it gets a little arcane, but this is something that's completely within our capabilities today.
Well, and this is something that the FAA does with full-scale aircraft. And so it's not like this is a foreign concept to them.
Right.
In some sense, it feels like they were tasked with regulating drones by Congress, and they went, if we're going to regulate drones, fine. All drones, 250 grams. Okay, we got this, right? Are we done? And you guys are in the room to say, no, let's, and you know, that's an uphill battle, but, you know, eventually, hopefully you get to the top of that hill, or at least halfway up the hill, or some way.
You touched on a really good point. There is a constant need to educate many people within the FAA. I remember having a conversation before remote ID, you know, before the NPRM, all that stuff. And I was talking to them about how, you know, the kids in our school, the people getting in the hobby, this burden of remote ID that's coming down the wire is just going to be too complicated. And he looked at me with all seriousness in his face. He says, but don't all these airplanes already have GPS?
They just don't know.
My jaw hit the floor. Yeah. And I'm like, let me show you a picture of what we're talking about. And for them, what they're regulating and what they picture is a DJI drone. That is what they picture in their mind. They're not picturing a 5-inch race quad. They're not picturing, you know, a foam board airplane from Flight Test, Horizon, fill in the blank.
Yeah.
Not picturing any of that. They're picturing a DJI drone, and that's what they're regulating. But that is only this much. And that solution remote ID, guess what? It's already built into their technology. So what you're doing is you're not really changing this. You're just eliminating all that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's easy to forget as somebody who's in the hobby. You know, somebody comes up to you. How often have you been out flying your racing drone and had or a foam board aircraft and have somebody come up and go, oh, hey, I know what that is. No, they never know what that is. I almost feel sympathy for the folks at the FAA because Congress said to them, regulate drones. And they were like, what, drones? Oh, okay. But then they didn't sit down and do the work.
No.
That's where I lose the sympathy, is they didn't go, okay, I am going to do the hard work of educating myself. They were just like, fine, drones. They're all DJI drones. Got it. 250 grams. Whatever.
Defense them. Yeah. Well, and here's the sad thing too, is those people change positions, and they also they come and go out of the FAA. They're not in there for life. So we can have a great connection with someone that knows it, understands it, loves it, appreciates it, wants to stand for it. But next year they may not be there, or they may be in a different department, and that's no longer their playground to work within. And you got to start all over, or hope and pray that that person shared the similar mentality. We've met a lot of incredible people within the FAA. I'll just say it that way. We have met some people that are like, okay, we can work with this person. They're cordial, they're kind, they're really passionate about seeing it in schools, seeing this hobby build. They understand how it connects. And then we talk to other people, and it's like, what planet did you come from, and why did you choose the FAA as your career path? You know, it breaks my heart. It's not even funny, but it just breaks my heart to see that. And that's what we got to deal with.
Well, it is an uphill battle, but it is a battle that needs to be fought. And it is a battle where if you are not constantly pushing, you will lose ground. And I don't know what it is about you guys that makes you want to go do that every day. I would not enjoy that, but I appreciate that you're there doing it. And even though we're not winning every battle that we would like to win, in fact, we're losing a lot of battles. The fact that you guys are still there, I hope that maybe in 10 or 15 or in 25 years, will you guys be as integrated into the process as the AMA is today?
I'm optimistic that we're already changing the trajectory. So it's things like in the Beyond Visual Line of Sight ARC, we got FPV incorporated, and it's incorporated in multiple places. And so we talked about FPV as improving situational awareness. So we tried to describe to folks that I have a much better view of the outside world than anyone in a Cessna 172. But that's, I was not in the cockpit, or the flight deck, so that's not okay. But they were okay with it improved situational awareness. So that's positive. So now we can use FPV to augment other work.
Little stepping stones.
Then the long range lifters and inspection folks were there and they're like, yeah, we want to use FPV so that we've got eyes on the ground because we've got all these sensors, but I'm blind to this big bird that's flying 150 miles away. So we got benefits there. We got the UAS facility grids improved. We've gotten lots of discussion on extended visual line of sight. That's in the current Advanced Aviation Advisory Committee. What was the DAC? That's in TG14. That'll be presented in April, May, June, somewhere, whenever they schedule it. The document's done. We've got a good piece of work there that furthers the idea of, okay, if it's not beyond visual line of sight, you all know that if we fly a drone behind or underneath a bridge, that's not allowed. Well, so for some period of time, what makes sense? And so we're making changes, and it's very incremental. But I do think that the slope and the trajectory is changing.
I agree. If you can bend that curve even slightly in the right direction, that's meaningful. Is that how I would sum that up? I want to close. I know we're coming up against our hard stop. I want to close with a question that has bugged me a lot lately, and I'd like to get you guys' take on it. There are some people out there who blame those who comply, those who registered their drones, those who got a trust test. They blame them and say that they are emboldening the FAA and making these things more likely, or the same people who say that non-compliance is what's needed to affect change, and that non-compliance alone would be sufficient to stop this. I'd like to get your thoughts on those 2 points. Whoever wants to go first. Josh, it looks like you're queued up.
Josh, go ahead.
I was just thinking, do those same people pay their taxes?
I don't know. Maybe some of them don't.
Yeah. It is absolutely 100% their right to not comply, as it's everyone's absolute 100% as an American to comply. And when you take the look at just growing the hobby again, let's just focus on kids. Let's focus on programs, outreaches, and schools. They do not have that option. That is not their personal right. They have to comply because they're part of something. So saying we need to have an absolute zero tolerance or 0% compliance, you are literally destroying. What a great way to bring victory to the people that want to hurt the hobby. You are eliminating all the new pilots coming in. It's self-serving. So again, I believe I'm a Second Amendment guy. I like firearms. I can understand where someone in the point in their life will say, I choose not to comply. That is their personal right as an American to choose that. Just as it's my personal right to give people a path to compliance and let them choose their options.
I come from 4 decades in global tech. And in global tech, the corporations, all of them, international corporations, have so much authority that we can do a lot in terms of helping and working with governments of individual countries to get regulations changed. That is not the way it is with civil air authority. And so in the 4 years that I've been involved and working with the FAA, once a rule is in place, it's done. And so the notion that, we'll get them to change it. Well, maybe you can get little changes on the margin, and that's what we're working for with Beyond Visual Line of Sight. But rescinding remote ID, I don't see it happening.
Like, as an aside, I'm wondering, how many people did we say are the FAA estimate for like UAS users?
1.78 million in the United States.
Do we have a current registration number from the FAA?
We do. I don't know it off the top of my head. It's obviously much lower.
I believe it's around 1 million the last time I saw, if not less. Right. So if you think about it like that, we can summarize that somewhere from 25 to 50% of the people are already not complying. And in those cases, that has not changed the FAA's opinion about who needs to comply and who doesn't. So
Great
that's sort of where I would go with that. I don't think that at least the amount of non-compliance that's happening has worked. And I think there's a question there of like, so how much non-compliance are we saying will work? And then as Josh has pointed out, we can't do that everywhere. People have to comply. There's some people who are required to, or some people who are in situations where they might be at disadvantages for other reasons if they just don't comply, So I think it's just important to understand this perspective.
The point that I like to make is that non-compliance by itself is not meaningful activism. So
we've heard it in a lot of different meetings too with the FAA. Is they're measured on compliance? How many people comply, and that's how they kind of vet it. And ironically, with 50% or less complying to the regulations, they obviously haven't taken the hint. But if we can move the target from 250 to 1 kilogram and remove that burden,
their compliance
on so many
will go
people
up.
Flying, guess what? Their compliance is going to dramatically change to the benefit of them. So it's a great way to say, hey, listen, stop measuring these people in this bracket with something that we know has no real calculatable harm or consequence to other people. And then you guess what? Now instead of 1.7 million users on the market, there's maybe only 1 million, maybe half of that. And guess what? The compliance issue is gone with planes that really need to be seen in the air or could do harm in a midair collision or could do harm to structures or people. And that would work out good.
Josh, you say they're measured on compliance, but if that's true, then that would suggest that mass non-compliance would have an effect.
Yeah, well, good point.
If they knew.
50% definitely hasn't, and they're not listening to the people that are choosing to try to comply. So trust is a good example with that. Like, try to get the trust out there. We were like, make a practical test that people can understand. Don't make it too complicated. And they're like, oh yeah, we got to make it work so people can take it, because if people don't take it because it's too complicated, it won't be good for us. You're absolutely right in your point, and I know I'm kind of speaking on both sides of my mouth, but I'm saying remove those burdens from people, and it'll look like a lot more people that need to comply are complying, and that will make them look better. Obviously, 50% isn't the low mark. Maybe if it was 10%, but I do know, what is it called? LEAP, David?
Yes.
Yeah, LEAP is
Law Enforcement Assistance Program.
Yep. So that's something coming down the pike that I don't want our community. I don't want someone showing up at the Flight Fest, looking around and all these kids building foam board airplanes and start handing out tickets. I don't want that day to come.
Yeah.
So stop regulating.
Yeah. Well, guys, I know we're up against our time. I'm going to put a link, as I said, down in the video description to the FTCA video, a little bit more information about the 1 kilogram limit, what they're doing and why they're doing it, and about how you can act, and I hope you will, by sending letters to your representatives. Again, it's just a simple copy paste. Please take the time to do it. We don't come out and nowhere and beg for you to do something very often. This is one of those times. Please do it. Thank you guys so much for talking to me and for all the work that you do.
Thank you. Thanks for your support, Joshua.
Absolutely.